Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and you're listening into the podcast. Really appreciate you. And because you've been listening faithfully, we have been ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. And help us keep the podcast going. Go ahead and review, rate, subscribe to the podcast. I really would appreciate that. All right. Now, today I'm talking with Gena C. Lovett, PhD, and I wanted to say it just like that. She's a speaker, executive consultant, and author of the book C-Suite Quotient: The 8 C-Suite Behaviors That Propel a Leadership Culture. She's a C-suite strategist who empowers executives to unlock their full leadership potential. And she has over 25 years in the corporate world, and she's led manufacturing operations at the Boeing Company, and she has worked in leadership positions as a global chief diversity officer at Alcoa and has had key roles at Ford. She's done amazing things. And if all that was not enough, she started her own company and she's the principal at Hidden Gems Consulting, which I can't wait to hear more about. And something that is particularly interesting to me, she serves as a trustee on the board of directors for, get this, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum, which she says indulges her love of music and meaningful community service impact. Welcome, Dr. Gena Lovett.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. I am so thrilled to be here today. I look
I'm,
forward to a great conversation.
I'm glad you're here. All right, so now you heard me kind of trying to get through your introduction, your bio on my own, but just why don't you tell us in your own words about you, whatever you want to say about you, and then
Mhm.
about the work you do.
Sure. I would best describe myself in two ways. I'm a dreamer and I'm a lifelong learner. Dreamer in that I always look at what's possible. I just can't, and starting with the glass half empty, they just aren't in my DNA. Um, Now, sadly, my mom and dad didn't think of it that way. They thought that I was a bit wishy-washy and they wanted me to nail down what I wanted to study, what my career ultimately was going to be. And I just didn't. I didn't. And I'm grateful for that because even the assignments that I've had when I was working in the corporate world, they really were not on the radar and they caused me to stretch myself in ways that I would not have. I went down avenues of learning, of experiences that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I, as you said, have a 25 plus year career working for iconic companies. And I am a trustee for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but I am also a public independent director for 3 public companies. And so that indulges my love of the corporate world without actually being there. On this side time, I get to advise and govern versus the management team. So this is quite a full life. I am married. I have, and it'll be 33 years in June. So I've been at this for a long time. My husband and I have a son who resides in California, and the joy in my life these days are my 2 Frenchies, Bella and Lola. They are wonderful. But that's kind of me. I mean, it's a lot here, but I've made it a point to sort of simplify my life to do things that are really interesting to me.
Sounds like it. It sounds like you have. Now, it's interesting that you worked for years in manufacturing leadership. How'd you get there?
Well, that was part of the dreaming I told you about. When I graduated Ohio State, the thought was to become an attorney. I took the LSAT and realized that did well, but realized that that was not something I wanted to do. I didn't see a lot of creativity in the law as I really thought about it. And my mom was working at Ford at the time, and she says, "Well, you're going to do something. You're going to get out of here and you're going to find a job and you're going to work while you're figuring it out. You know, we supported you through school. It's time that you sort of, figure this thing out." And so I began as a first line supervisor. And I got to tell you, I absolutely loved it because no 2 days were alike. No
Oh,
2 days were alike. And so if you screwed it up, didn't, perform the way you wanted to one day, I had a 38.5 mile drive each way. So I would have a lot of time to contemplate, to analyze, and most importantly, put my game plan together for what I was going to do the next day. So I initially loved it. And I got to wear Dockers and flat, comfortable shoes versus the skirts and nylons and tights that are required in a more traditional corporate role. And so I found that that was my niche. And the other thing is I was exposed to people from all walks of life. My first role was to manage 55 people on the engine line for Ford Motor cars. And there were PhDs who just really liked the benefits. And so they were there. There were people that had served prison time and they were being rehabilitated. They're working. And there were college students who would come in and work. And so it was really, and the diversity was just off the chain. I mean, beyond the obvious of male, female, and, race. It was just, there was just a pot, a gumbo, if you will, of really interesting and different people. And that was really pivotal, I think, in being able to take these roles and being able to embrace people that and don't think like I do necessarily, and certainly they don't look like me necessarily.
yeah. And it's interesting to me, in your first role out, you were in a leadership role. You said you started out as a supervisor. I mean, there,
I did. And yeah, it wasn't easy. I had to learn the art of compromise. I had to, I didn't know what an engine, all the parts of an engine. So I had a little notebook and I would go to each station on the engine line and I would have a conversation with the person responsible for that part. And I would ask them, what is this? And how does it work? And then I would jot it down in my book. And I think that was really the beginning of my connection with people because for them, I didn't come in as the leader who pretended that she knew everything.
hmm
I was humbled enough to ask, and I didn't think I was doing anything that was really, earth shattering, but I knew I wanted to survive in this job. And I knew that I didn't have the answers. And I also knew that I had to learn quickly. So yeah, it was a leadership role, but it was also one very much of learning and an exchange of information between them and me.
Yeah, it just says a lot about you, both of those things. That you started, they saw your potential. You started out in a leadership role, and then the way you initiated your time there. Okay, so now let's talk about your book. Let's
Okay.
move over to your book. Tell us the premise. Tell us the title again, and then sort of the main point of the book.
The main point of the book is that leadership begins with all of us, but when you look to the top echelon of leaders, meaning the most senior leaders, they have a responsibility to lead and to embody the behaviors that they want to see. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there are 8 specific behaviors, and this was I arrived at this through research for my dissertation, interviewing various C-suite members and CEOs, and what really came out was the need for integrity, trust, respect, vision, empowerment, collaboration, transparency, and communication. So those are the 8 behaviors that are in the title of my book. Now you might say, okay, so what? We've heard respect, we've heard trust, we've heard vision. The thing that makes this work is that they all complement each other. They
Mm,
all complement each other. And I'll speak a bit more about that in a moment. And then the other thing is about understanding culture, accepting that it has come into the workplace, it has come into anything that we do, and understanding that, seeking to understand is a way of creating a flourishing organization, be it corporate, be it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame board, be it any organization that you belong to. I would venture to say even in your relationships with people, Yeah, that is important.
Yes, and I see, well, based on where I'm sitting and listening to you, you started out in your early professional career with leadership, and then now you're still here with this wisdom to share with other leaders. Is
Yeah.
there anything that you could remember or connect with little Jenna, maybe in elementary school or high school, that had some leadership budding or some inkling that you would look when you look back, you're like, ah, I see now.
Yeah, I actually can go back further. I am the eldest of three girls. And so it was definitely my job to be a bit more mature. I was supposed to, when we were getting into trouble, I was supposed to know better. And I was treated accordingly because the view was I'm the oldest and I should know better. And so I went into that, I guess, in school and just loved learning, really loved learning. And I'll have you know, you're looking at the sixth grade spelling bee champion in my elementary school. My name, when I went back a few years, was still up on a plaque there, but that began the need to excel, you know, the desire to excel. And you know, in working at Ford Motor Company, I was in supervisory positions in different areas, but supervisory positions for about 5 years. And then my career just took off. A leader there tapped me, and the unique thing about Ford at the time, they were well ahead of their time, because I'm speaking 94, 95. They realized that they did not have enough women in leadership roles. And so the role you wanted then was the plant manager's role. So you're a plant manager of your own facility. There were none of us, very few. And so a cohort, of which I was a part, began, and we went through this immersive learning, and we would move to different positions, and in my case, different facilities. So I had to move away from Cleveland, where I had been working at Ford. My first move was to Michigan, and from Michigan it was to Chicago, and from Chicago it was from Atlanta, and from Atlanta it was back to Michigan. It There was an expectation that we master each component and then become a plant manager. It took me 5 years, but I did become a plant manager of our prototype division. And again, that was a little bit unconventional because I had grown up in the assembly world where we're actually putting the cars together. Prototype is you're working on something years before it actually hits the street. And so there are a lot of different requirements for that. But that's kind of how, and then the other thing from a personal side is being one of three girls, my father was relentless on us education.
Mm,
Here's a man who was a math whiz, but he was, because he's passed away, since passed away, he was an example of dreams unrealized. I won't even say deferred, dreams unrealized. His mom passed away when he was younger, and he had to go to school. And this was in the South, and he went to school to help support he left school to help support the family. And so he never was able to, you know, have the experience of higher education in the sense of formal higher education. And so for us, he just said, you're blessed, you know, you're fortunate, and you need to make the most of this. And so it was that, and it was always not falling victim to the fact that we were girls. Hence me boldly walking into these manufacturing facilities and leading, where I was, you know, in many cases, in the instances, the only, uh, and also not to become a victim to our skin color. He said, do you know what you are? He said, go into these roles, whatever you do, with the desire to help, to be a resource and to help. And while you're doing that, before you do that, he says, learn, learn, learn. And I've since coined that, my understanding of that throughout the years, to mean hone your craft and skill, because competence breeds confidence. And so when I would walk into these roles, didn't know anyone, I knew they were looking at me, who's this lady? And I was confident about my preparedness as far as learning. Never thought I knew it all, because we can always learn something. Um, and if so, I had this platform, really, that confidence to go in and really figure out how I could be a resource so that we could get the things done that we needed to get done.
I can only imagine what that was like for you. But fortunately, you had your father's wisdom with you as you went out throughout those years. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I can remember having some really tough roles and even as an adult and saying something to my father, and he was like, brush yourself off. He said, if you don't want to be there anymore, don't go do something else. But if you do, they don't make that decision for you. You do. And he would basically say, dust yourself off and get back in there.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so grateful for that. Well, it wasn't always at the time, but I am so grateful for that. And I married a husband who feels the exact same way and has said the exact same thing to me, not in more, direct terms, but he's encouraged me to go right back out there and keep doing it
yeah.
if I
'Cause
love it.
he can be direct because that's the role of the husband.
Exactly, exactly.
So how'd you get from Ford to Boeing?
In each of my three roles, I've only worked for three companies throughout my lifetime. In each of my three roles, I was recruited.
Oh,
And each time I was recruited twice before I accepted the role, the attempt twice. So meaning the first time they attempted to recruit me, I did not, a company attempted to recruit me, I did not. And I am a very loyal employee. And so when I work, I want to, give my all. And I knew by this time that I added value. I knew that I made a difference. In the case of Ford Motor Company, you may remember that crash of 2008, where a lot of businesses, we were in trouble. And I remember my Ford stock went down to a penny,
ooh,
a penny. And the leaders at the time, the Ford family, called us together and said, we're going to survive, but we're going to be a much smaller company.
mm,
And in smaller meetings with my direct managers, they said, you're a bright, bright, bright star. You need to understand, though, that your career is going to be arrested for several years if you stay. And I was okay with that. And then Alcoa came calling. I interviewed with them, and the role they were asking me, it was to manage one facility on a huge manufacturing campus. And I spoke with the plant manager and the director of that campus, and I thought, I'm much more qualified than one plant. I told the recruiter, when they want to offer me the job for the entire campus, then I'll consider it. And sure enough, I had two more roles. I was actually I had moved to Atlanta, Chicago, Atlanta, and back to Dearborn, and got a call from the guy. He tracked me down through all those moves. And Easter break, I would go home to Cleveland, and that was it. And I had days off, so I went into the facility, and the rest is history. I decided to take it. Now, mind you, sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for and what you do. On the onset, this was great, right? I moved back home with mom and dad, family. I was in the same state with them, city with them. And I said, I left a manufacturing company. I'm going to a manufacturing company. Can't be that hard. Can't be that hard. I will tell you that within the first 2 weeks of that role, I was home, but we had a power outage and no backup. So you're walking around in the dark. We worked in chemicals, and so we had a release that released a sickening greenish yellow uh, fumes into the sky, and we shut down everything within 2 miles of us. And I will tell you, I began thinking about my manager at Ford saying, if you want to come back, you can come back and come back. It was not a promising start, but it was, let's just say, under every rock, there were opportunities.
mm,
And fast forward to the beauty of that, it was about understanding the culture and breaking some of the things in the culture that did not serve us well. And it was about assembling a team that wanted the same thing, and that was to win. And placing people who were expert in their fields in roles reporting to me. it took us almost 4 years, but we turned the facility around to record numbers they had never seen before in the areas of safety, how safe we kept our people, quality, the product we were delivering, cost. We did it, and the place began to make money. It wasn't in the red all the time. And the thing that's most important to me, I should say, is we really had an engaged group of people. And that was probably the hardest task of everything, of all the customs we had and all the things we had to do. That was the toughest. And that's, I think, Dr. Robin, when I began to really understand the power of culture and diversity.
Um,
So as I said, I ended up doing well in that role and was asked to come to corporate in New York City, 54th and Park. I'll always remember that, to headquarters there, and become the global chief diversity officer. Didn't want to do it. Did not want to do it. Resisted,
mhm.
because with Ford, and then in this role as director for this campus, my day would be hard hat, steel-toed boots, walking into the facilities, looking at a sexy hunk of metal and understanding that that sexy hunk of metal the finished product was gonna be bulkheads for airplanes and some of the things that we built. This role was corporate. It was my first introduction to the board, because I had to go in and present to the company board. And it was the first role where I had to influence versus having all the direct responsibility to say, you do this, we're going to go this way, we're going to go that. I was working with people who didn't have to do anything they didn't want to do. But I needed to be able to convince, partner, and persuade. So Boeing came calling. We did well there. Boeing came calling, and it was for a global chief diversity officer's job. I came to Chicago. I didn't want to do it. They didn't. They kept saying to me, "You're suited for manufacturing. Why aren't you back in manufacturing? You're a manufacturing expert by now. Why aren't you doing it?" So by mutual agreement, I didn't get the job. 6 months later, they called me back, and this was for a job of twice the responsibility, and it was managing a $30 billion business unit from the manufacturing side. And so my mission, should I choose to accept it at Boeing, was to change the culture, and it was to create an operating system so that the products we made were repeatable, quality, getting them out on time, et cetera. And so that's how I got there. And everything that I had done prior to that, I needed, and then some, for the Boeing role, because it was really large scale.
Sounds like it. It sounds like it. And I think it's very interesting to me that each of the roles or the capacities, the different companies, you were recruited. It was not like you were actively looking to go to that particular place,
Yeah,
that someone else saw your gifts and then you ended up
yeah.
making the decision to
People
go.
poured into me. They really did.
Yeah, yeah. So then what led you then to then start Hidden Gems Consulting?
So I had not intended to do that. When I left Boeing to finish my PhD. I had begun it while I was working for Boeing. And as you know, Dr. Robin, the curriculum it gets increasingly more time consuming and difficult. And so Boeing too was going through some changes, and it was going to be a different company. And I had accomplished what I had been asked to accomplish there, and the PhD. And I decided that after 25 years of really tough roles, that I was going to finish this PhD and perhaps go back afterwards. As you know, COVID hit, and I didn't. But within the walls of Boeing, 180,000 person, company. Think about that. And so, whereas some people would go to different companies to gain different experiences, you could go in different places within Boeing. And one of the things they told me is, we brought you in from the outside. We don't do that much, but we're probably going to have to begin to do it more because we just don't have the talent. And I'm thinking, with 180,000 people, we don't have the talent. So I set about to find people who did well in the job that they were in. And I have a little bit different way of assessing talent. Talent to me is the potential versus having the experience all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, I managed rocket scientists. They were actually responsible for putting together space capsules, et cetera. And so that's not something that a role that you place someone in for potential. They need to have the training and the know-how. But most other roles, absolutely. And I began to think of these people as hidden gems. They were embedded within the organization, overlooked, many of them women, many of them males of people of color, and then just everyone in general, but people who had the potential and could do more. And so I began to think of them as hidden gems, and that's how I would describe them when they say, "Wow, how did you find this person?" Well, it's really scouting that, and really you have to be interested. And I write about this in my book. You have to really go a mile deep and an inch wide, and often we don't do that. We don't do that. And because we did that, we were able to put some people in, really key positions, place the infrastructure around them, support them, and have them excel. I'm proud of the talent that I recognized and helped in their careers. I helped make many executives, get them into the executive ranks. Now, of course, they did it themselves, but they had the support and the infrastructure to be able to do that. So as I was thinking, when pandemic hit, I thought, now that I'm not working, maybe I'll start to consult, because I've been asked to take a look at some things within companies. And I thought to myself, this is consulting. And so I went ahead during this pandemic and just began the company. I had to think of names. And then I thought, hidden gems, because that's what they are. And my job, if I'm doing it well, is to help polish those gems.
Yeah.
So long way to explain it, but that's how I arrived at the company's name.
I love that. And so now that Hidden Gems is its own entity, do you still serve those same people that you served before, or you're serving other people to discover these or hidden
I'm
gems? Or how
serving other people because I had not written the book yet. And so the book is now incorporated into that. And so I'm really concentrating on promoting the book. I'm speaking, but I always have time for the people that I mentor. I don't throw them away once I leave a company. They are actually lifelong mentors. And so where I'm needed, I got a call yesterday, as a matter of fact. I need your opinion on something. I just give it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You're probably always going to get a call. Those recruiters are probably going to come back around too, if they haven't already. You've had a very interesting career journey. Would you say at this point now where you are, do you have a sense of purpose in your work?
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. I root for the underdog, that is the unpolished gem. I really do. I root for them. I also root for organizations who want to have flourishing cultures and they want to do well and they just don't know how. And, when looking at these behaviors, if done well, if done, it definitely places companies on the right track for doing that. And I noticed in these roles that I would take that the first thing I had to always do was go in and address the culture, always. Whether that meant encouragement to become a winning culture, maybe it was encouragement to become a speak up culture versus at the water cooler, always something. And I also, as I began to climb the ladder, it was almost like, have you seen the movie The Wizard of Oz? Dorothy and the animals, they go through all this stuff, this adventure in danger to get to Oz. And once they get in, there's this little man behind, booming into a machine. That was kind of my experience when I really reached the upper echelon of within corporate organizations. And I found that we speak a lot about the things we should be doing, the vision, how we should behave. You've seen the mission statements. We treat everyone with respect. We will do, there is a list of them. And I found that often, not all the time, but often, those things apply to the people in roles subordinate to them, not them. So it was a do as I say, not as I do kind of environment. And not that they were necessarily maliciously knowing that they were doing that. I think it was just a lack of understanding of culture, of people, and how we think about things. So when you think about the 8 behaviors, there are 3 that you've got to have 100%. They are non-negotiable. You can't be 90% trustworthy. You can't have integrity most of the time, but not quite all. And respect is a really important one because it means different things to different people. So that is why you have to go, a mile deep and an inch wide. You have to understand that. Whereas communication, empowerment, those things are skills that we can work on. So the encouragement is really a love letter. And I say this in the cover of my book, the prologue, that my book is a love letter to C-suite leaders, as well as those who aspire for leadership. And it is simply to say, I understand that you don't necessarily want to sit in front of a coach and be told about shortcomings. I understand that you certainly don't want to have someone call you out within a meeting or somewhere at work. Reading this book is a safe way, safe space for saying, maybe this applies to me. And it's an opportunity to self-correct if it does apply to you, but also it's a way forward for the types of people we want to invite into these leadership positions.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so now let's think about somebody else in a leadership role more broadly, wherever they are, unofficial leadership or maybe official leadership role, but they're high achieving women, and they're yearning for more meaning and purpose. They are at a level of success that looks good on the outside for everyone, looks like nothing's wrong, people are proud of them, but for them there's something missing. It's just not fulfilling, and they want more meaning and purpose. And let me tell you about my definition of high achieving so you'll know who you're speaking to. When I say high achieving woman, I'm talking about a woman who's having that experience, but she is responsible, goal oriented,
Mm-hmm.
ambitious in a positive way. She's good at a few things, and people recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
So in her professional life, people come to her and ask her questions, whether it's related to what she does or not, but she's sort of the go-to. In her personal life, at home, family, friends, community, they come to her and ask her questions about any random thing, whether it's related to anything she has experience with or not. They come to her and ask her. So she's kind of supporting everybody, right? And that's okay with her, but she's the one that's supporting everyone else. So when I initially started the podcast, I had her in mind and I said, well, who supports her? So I thought, okay, we'll all come together and then we'll share advice that will help each other
Mm-hmm.
because we fit into that category. And now this season of the podcast, I narrowed it a little more and said, now that same woman is at a place where she's feeling like something's missing and she's looking for meaning and purpose. And for you, as someone who has found purpose in your work, what can you say to her that might help her as she continues on her journey?
I don't think that there's an absolute right response to this, but I'll tell you what I did. I took a step back and I really critically surveyed all I'd done, um, who I'd helped, what in terms of what I mean to people. Do people care to hear what I have to say? Do people know that I'm there if they need me? And I think what I'm describing is I really asked myself, what is my purpose? And to me, that is one of the best exercises we can do for ourselves. What is my purpose? Not my purpose within work, not my purpose in my role as a wife, a mother, an aunt, a niece, a daughter, a son. What is my purpose? Do you know it took me many attempts to come back and to really be able to put something down on paper? Um, I'm at a point in my life where I want to do something that people can point to when I'm no longer here. I want to raise a human being who is a good human, responsible, empathetic, self-aware. So if I were her, I would step back and take stock. I would then also ask myself, what is it that I really like doing? What do I like doing? Not so much a worry of, am I good at it? Because it's my belief that if you really like something, if you're really passionate about it, you accomplish that. You find a way to do it. And then the other thing, and they've been very helpful for me, is my village. Who is her village? You'd be surprised. And I was that person for many years that had just myself. When I discovered the power of my village, um, the load was shared. My mom would say to me sometimes, sweetheart, don't worry about this. Unpack your suitcase. You're traveling. You've got too many clothes. You need to travel more lightly. That's what our village, that's what they do for us. Because let's face it, a lot of times at work, we're doing well. But when we encounter those bumps, or sometimes we perceive them to be bumps, and they really aren't the bumps that we think they are. So it helps, and sometimes they are exactly what we think they are. It helps to have that village around you to understand, and keep you grounded, to someone to have your back, someone to tell you the truth, someone who can look at you and see that you're tired visibly and tell you that and get your way. I cannot stress enough the importance of that. And getting comfortable sitting with yourself. I had what's called monkey brain, where when I lie down at night, the brain would still be going, would still be going, still be going. I learned it was difficult, but I learned to sort of center myself. Once you do that, you can think, I think, better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then these people that come to her and help her, maybe she needs to delegate some of that. But if she enjoys doing it, continue to do it. But do something that makes you happy and that you want to do as well.
Yes. I appreciate that. And I'm thinking she does too. Dr. Jenna, you've been so generous with your time and wisdom and insight with your experience. I appreciate you for being here. Now, somebody might be saying, well, where can I get the book, or how can I hear more, or how can I hear more about Hidden Gems Consulting? Where can they be in touch with you?
They can visit me on my website. There's obviously, I'm certainly on LinkedIn, but my website, Gena C. Lovett, all one word, .com would be great. And I also want to share, because this is my passion, and great leadership, I think, makes the world better all around in this period of incivility that we find ourselves. I'm offering a 30-minute coaching session. And so ask me what it is that's on your mind as it relates to work and your career. And I will empty my toolbox and help share what I know.
Well, that's generous of you. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here. Appreciate that.
You are so welcome anytime.
All right. And, for people who are listening, I'd love to hear your response to this episode. If you have questions or comments or anything you want to say, reach out to me on social media. I spend most of my time on LinkedIn at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. And if you're that person who I mentioned earlier and you're thinking about, there's really something missing, I need some more meaning and purpose in my work and I'm yearning for it, I have a resource for you at the podcast website, Leadership Purpose Podcast. leadershippurposepodcast.com. And so I hope to see you there. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.